I'm going to get straight into our presentation because we're trying to put 10 years of practice into half an hour, which is quite a challenge. But just to say, on behalf of the staff that are with me and the staff in Dublin, we're really delighted to be here with you today. We're not academics, we're not researchers, we're practitioners. Conferences like this are fantastic because you do all the hard work. We come along, take your findings and put it into practice. So it's wonderful for us to hear what we've been hearing. So I'm going to try and zoom in and out of this laptop because I wear glasses, but they're not that strong to get me in there. So if you just bear with me on that. And Roisin is going to be playing the videos. So I suppose we have three objectives for the presentation today. One is to give you sort of a background and a context. The second is to tell you about the start of our journey and how we have tried to develop a culture of change within our organization, and then to give you examples of how we have approached horse welfare. And I think you'll find pretty much that what we're going to talk about over the next half hour is very, very much mapped onto the principles of learning theory and equitation that are set out in the front of the book, and there may be other pieces as well. But I suppose just to put in context the whole field of equine welfare in riding schools, I'm not too sure how these map onto European qualifications, but within the United Kingdom, which includes obviously England, Wales and Scotland, and obviously Ireland is not part of the UK, but it uses the same educational framework for coaches, which is the British Horse Society qualifications. And as you'll see there, the huge majority of people who are coaching in the United Kingdom and within Ireland are assistant instructors, which is the very basic level of the ladder of qualifications for coaches. And coaches are responsible for teaching people and also for managing horse welfare. But then we see a dramatic drop when we come to the next stage of coaches education, which is your intermediate instructor. And we only have 411 people across the UK and Ireland, and that's over 10 years. And then we have our eyes, and then we have our fellows, which are really, I suppose, considered to be world coaches. Now, the really worrying part about this is that as things stand within the BHS syllabus, it doesn't include equine cognition. So we have this huge number of assistant instructors coaching thousands and thousands of people, and more worrying is that the people who go into the industry of coaching are being supervised and mentored and taught by people who remain at the very basic rung of the ladder of qualifications. So that's really, I suppose, to highlight how important it is that people are educated in a very sensible and responsible way about coaching both people and horses. I'd also say that the BHS structure, whilst it has many positives, you know, truthfully, to be taking on board human cognition and equine cognition within the framework as it currently stands, I'm not too sure if it can actually do that. But that's a whole other debate. Within our organization, we are mainly focused on the human-horse interaction. We deal with a very, very diverse population, many of whom have an intellectual disability, many of whom come into us with very troubled backgrounds, many people who've been in care, many people who don't have a lot of empathy for people or horses, people with ADHD, ADD, dual diagnosis, which is learning disability and mental health issues, and many, many more. And then we have a very mainstream population. So in terms of our model of a riding school, it's a very integrated model. And the only common denominator is people's passion to be with a horse, to do whatever they're going to do. So that's where we come in to try and accommodate that. So just to give you an idea, we have about, I don't know how many we've got there, 180. This is every week. We have 180 riders who come in for group lessons, which is mainstream. We have 137 children who come in for therapeutic riding. We have 63 young people and adults with an intellectual disability who come in to help out in a riding school, as many kids do, but with a higher level of support. We have 12 young people who come in who have extreme social and emotional difficulties to work with the horses. We've got another group of people who come in for equine assisted learning. We do private lessons, we do vaulting. We have lots of public events, so we might have 150 people coming in for St. Patrick's Day, and we do pony rides. So there's quite an amount of interaction with horses. So at a minimum, and I think we've totally underestimated this, we have about 500 people who come into our yard every week. On a given day, we have each horse will interact with approximately 27 people doing different things. And within that activity, you might have 10 or 12 different things going on. So grooming might be one of them, but then you've got all the grooming. You've got the brushing, moving from side to side, and there's a lot of mistakes that happen. So we'd lovely examples of the consistency and what happens. We don't have that. You know, that's just not possible for us. We strive for it, but it's not possible. So the horse puts it up with a lot. And of course, within the human-horse contact, there's various levels of understanding, cognition from here to there, lots of different abilities and a lot of learning disabilities, a lot of emotional states, and we have a lot of people who come in very high in energy, very troubled, a lot of different people with different coordination, perception, level of tolerance, intentions, and so on and so on and so on. So all of this, as we know, affects the horse in many, many different ways. Now listen, we all know that horses in a human world, it's totally unnatural. You know, they go from living out to living in stables. They go from having this nice head carriage to something different. They go to living and grazing 16, 18 hours a day, and they eat the hard feed. So really, we know all of that. The one concept I just want to ask you to think about, and I'm not going to dwell on it because it's a whole other debate, is the concept of ownership or responsibility. Do we own a horse, or are we responsible for the horse? And you can just think about that. And for us, that's very important, because if we start talking about owning horses within our context, it's almost like we can do what we like with them, and you can't, because we don't believe that's right. I just have a quick look and see what we're doing. So there we go. So problems, there are many problems for horses in a human world. And again, you know, we know most of this stuff. So we have three choices when we have problems between horses and people. The first thing is we can ignore the problems. You know, a horse kicks on the door, moves away from something that he's become used to doing and nobody's corrected him or taught him how not to move away. So we just live with it. It's okay. It doesn't really bother us. The second alternative is that we can just get rid of the horse. This happens a lot of horses. Their problems become too much. We don't know how to deal with them. So we either sell them on, or they might get sent to the up there somewhere. Or the other thing is that we can make positive changes. Now, just very briefly, for us within our organisation, within an Irish context, and I suggest it's very much the same across Europe, we do not have the land to sustain horses living out. So we wake up tomorrow morning and we feel very altruistic, and we say, okay, we're going to put all the horses back to live naturally with each other. It just won't happen because we don't have the land. And so what happens then is that what we have to do is make ethical decisions about how we manage horse welfare. And so for us, we have this kind of mantra. It's a compass, and north is replicating a horse's environment in the best way we possibly can, but we know it's not going to happen. But if we don't go north, and if we don't make those ethical decisions, we remain static. And that's not good, because there is so much that we don't know. We think we know a lot, but there's an awful lot that we don't know. So we have to keep going north. Just in terms of how we manage horse welfare, it's not unidirectional, it's actually multidimensional. So just a couple of the ways that we try to manage it. The first is education, and it's so important, particularly as I referred to earlier, within the BHS framework, it doesn't cover an awful lot that we need to know around working with horses. So we have an educational program for helpers. Many children go into equestrian centres to help out at the weekends, and they come into us as well. But they just don't come in without having had training. So we have a program. They pay for it because we're a business. You know, we all operate in an economic model, and we have to make business work commercial. So they pay for as long as they need to pay for to learn in order that they can work with our horses. We do volunteer training. All the volunteers, we have about 50 volunteers annually, if not more, so they all have to undergo training in order to work with the horses. We do a lot of action research. Now, we're not academics. We don't profess to be academics. So it's all action research, trying to find solutions to practical problems. And we try to be as creative as we can. So we work with undergrads, postgrad students who might want to do their thesis, you know, within the context of our organization. External events, you know, we invest quite an amount of money in events like this. So there's 6 of us here. You do a quick calculation to see how much it's cost, but it's worth it because we'll go away from today with at least one idea each as to how to improve horse welfare. And there's a multiplier effect there because we work with so many people. And we have a lot of people who come to do interns with us, intern placements, work experience. So it's not just what each one of us brings, it's how that multiplies across the next year and so on, and across other people. We pilot new approaches. Some work, some don't. In order to pilot new approaches, you've got to create a culture of support and safety, because piloting something means we don't know and we're going to try, and if we're going to try, we're exposing ourselves, we're vulnerable. So we try to do that in the safest possible way. And recently we appointed an equine welfare and education coordinator to try and bring together all of what we're doing. So this is our journey. So let me just talk then about some of the things that we do. So some of the things we're going to talk about are very practical. Some of them are very quick. They don't cost money. Others do cost a bit of money. But try and, you know, just maybe one thing take away. So we all know that stabled horses in stables with no access to other horses are in isolation and is totally counter to how they are. So what we started doing over the past couple of years is dropping all the stables. So we're just going to play, just before we play the video, and this may seem nothing, but for a horse it means a lot. So it's just to show you, just a couple of seconds. Off you go, Roisin. So you're going to see just the 3 horses. The one in the middle is quite happy to look out onto the yard, and the other... Okay, so we've skipped that, but that's fine. So that's fine. So it's a long night for horses if they don't have any access to each other. And so you can see we just put in the new cavity blocks there. So they can pair groom with each other in the evening. So horses that are with each other in isolation from 7 to 7 in the morning, it's a pretty long time for a horse. The other thing we do within our centre is that you see these 3 horses here, and we've 36 horses that live at Festina. The ropes, we have ropes in front of all the stables so people can't go up to the horses. Because every time, you remember 500 people every week? So if they're going up to the horse and petting the horse on the face like that, it gets pretty tedious for the horses. They may accept it, they may retreat to the back of the stable, or they may bite the person. So all of our horses have this space where nobody can actually go up to them, bar the number of people that are interacting with them. There's a lot of research which has been done about group housing for horses. We only have 4 little ponies here that live together. The only time you might find a little bit of scuttering around with each other is around feed time, but it works quite well. We did pilot knocking down the stables and putting horses in a sort of group housing situation. Disastrous. Cost a lot of money, not safe for people, not safe for horses. I just don't think it was big enough. And maybe in hindsight we didn't make the right choices. I don't know what it was, but we had to build up the walls again. But you know, we tried it and it didn't work. There's been a lot of research done about feed. And of course, all stabled horses invariably have this hard feed regime where they're being fed once, twice, 3 times a day. So they go from a totally unnatural environment of eating 16 hours a day to being fed 3 times. And we all know about ulcers and stereotypical behaviors resulting from not having access to feed. I won't go through the chart, but I mean, our hard feed rate has dropped quite a lot. So we have all our horses on this continuous feeding system, which essentially means that the horse can just nibble away at the hay. It's packed up right to the top. It holds 9 kgs of hay, and as the horse nibbles away and takes out limited bits of feed, the grid thing drops down. In terms of what we've noticed, I mean, we did a couple of comparative studies using video analysis. Horses lay down much more, they didn't pace as much around the stable, they didn't look out the window as much. Anecdotally, what we found was that when we went in to tack up a horse, they weren't sort of as, now I've got to be careful now for you scientists, guys. Anyway, in terms for what we saw, they didn't turn around and bite as much. They were less anxious when we went into the stable. Little fatter. Some of them could go to fat fighters for sure. But you know, on the plus side, we now have a very, very successful delivery manure service. And we make about 15,000 euros a year from that. We live in a very urbanized area in Dublin. So people love the idea of getting mature manure delivered for the garden. This little pony here, we have 4 little ponies, and generally when new people come in, they're given the little ponies to lead, simply because they're small and it's safe. But there's a very poor and low level of leading. So we ran into some problems with this little pony, and we'll just show you what happened with him. So it wasn't straight leading, it wasn't what we wanted, so we just took him on as a project and applying equitation science principles. It took about 4 or 6 weeks to get it right. And we'll move on to the next one. Okay, so I'm just going to fast forward just to show you after maybe 4 or 5 weeks, we just had him walking on a straight line. Now, that said, because he still works with people who have low-level leading skills, you know, we've got to reinforce the training every now and again. His name is Sean. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is bits. For us, we don't like bits, particularly when we have novice riders, people with disabilities. There's a lot of pulling. So out of the 36 horses that live at Festina Lenti, we probably have maybe 25 who never wear bits. So if we just show this video. So I just want to watch, I want to draw your attention to how this horse behaves when she's getting a bit of bridle. So you'll see a bit of head shaking. You'll see some tail swishing later on. She does try to bite the handler at the end. Not too keen to have the bit of metal put in her mouth. She saves the bite to the end, or the attempt to bite. So you see a lot of head shaking. Okay, so we'll move on to the next one. So this was when we tacked her up in a bitless bridle. The fact that she has a roller and pad on her means absolutely nothing, because she would have had a roller and pad on her with the other one, so it wasn't a cue for anything. But she almost drops her head into the bridle. And the only behavior that we noticed with her on this was just one head shake. So the whole thing around bit and bitless bridles is the focus of a poster session that we have outside, which, well, it showed its significant statistical significance in terms of increased positive behaviors, negative behaviors in relation to bitted bridles. Okay, so that was Nina. The other thing that and I think it's a problem in a lot of riding schools, is clipping horses. This little pony came to us with a problem. He's quite sensitive, I'd say, probably got a lot of interactions with the whip at some stage. So I just want to draw your attention to the fact that when we go in, somebody is at the bottom, they bring out the clippers, and you'll just see just a small example of how he behaved. And he sees it, and off he goes. When we had to have Henry clipped, initially we would give him acetylene, then we had to get the vet down to knock him out completely, because he was absolutely unsafe. To one point, he actually came out of it much quicker than we expected, and he kicked out of the handler, so We actually didn't know what to do. So as it happened, we tried applying equitation science principles. So what we did was over 6 weeks, this isn't, the saddle wasn't on him when we were doing this, but over 6 weeks, we literally just stepped him forward and backwards on both sides. So this is a simple, no-cost approach for anybody who has a problem with clipping the horse. So we just stepped him forward and stepped him back. 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the afternoon for 6 weeks. And when he was absolutely light as a feather, going backwards and forwards, then we start to clip. So this is his first time being clipped, I'd say, in 8 years without being knocked out or being given some settling by us. I have to say, I was petrified. I actually didn't think it was going to happen. I didn't think it would work. And off we went. And then just another part of the video. And yeah, so we just wanted a lot of head lowering, and actually he began to lower his head independently at that stage. And since then, that's probably about 3 years ago since we did this particular work with Henry. So at this stage, we actually don't need to do anything. We might just go in when he needs to be clipped, stepping back once forwards, and off we go. It costs nothing. In fact, it's cheaper and it's safer than it was the previous time. Within our organization, so that's just a few examples of how we manage horse health welfare. Within our organization, we do a strategic plan every 3 years. And this is the first year that we've actually included equine welfare in our strategic plan. So over the next 3 years, what we plan to do is understand, so everybody will understand the basic principles of equitation science. Now, bearing in mind the number of people that interact with our horses, that's a fairly ambitious plan, but we're giving ourselves 3 years for that. One is that they'll be light in hand in all areas, in the stable, in the yard, all the way down to the track, everywhere. They'll be stand still until they're asked to move. They'll be handled with consistency, and that is probably the single most biggest challenge for us. Not just because we have people, numbers of people, it's the variation of cognitive ability of the people that work with the horses. To have maximum variety in their working day, that all riders will ride with light hands. And bearing in mind, our riders are predominantly novice riders and people with an intellectual disability. So that's actually quite difficult. Correctly fitted and appropriately placed tack, and to have back care under constant review. There's quite an amount of research around back care, particularly for therapeutic riding horses, because of the lack of coordination and the poor balance of a lot of our riders. And there's an overweight problem as well. Just a couple of other little things that we do. We ban clicking. Absolutely ban it. Nobody's allowed to click, because it's just giving a cue that the horses don't understand. So we banned clicking probably within the last year, and then we culminated that effort into a no-click week. And we put a lot of effort into it. And you will not, in fact, I hate to say this, some of the staff were the worst ones to get rid of the problem of clicking, because they've been doing it the longest. It's easier to teach the new ones. So we don't allow clicking. So if you come into our centre, you really won't hear clicking. And if you do, it's like, who clicked? And all of a sudden people are gone. You don't know who they are. The other thing is we use a tele-rein gauge because of the rider. So we use a tele-rein gauge to see what pressure has been put on the horse, even in bitless. And the other thing is we ban patting. Absolutely out of the question. Nobody pats a horse in the yard. It's all about scratching. There's a daily out list for all horses. So you can see how expressive those horses are. We let our horses out at the bottom of the yard, and then we open up all the gates and they all go off. So they all get out every single day. And they have a day off, pretty much like the staff. We say we get a weekend, we get the day off. The other thing is that you may find this a bit ridiculous, but we don't use the word whip, we use the word wand. And the reason that we use the word wand is that you wish for nice things to happen with a wand and you hurt with whips. And our population, we've so many people, you know, they'd be pretty handy with the L, whip. So we ban it. But the funny thing is, we noticed, is that when we introduced this idea, and I think the staff probably found it most uncomfortable to say, you know, where's your wand? It felt pretty silly. But what we noticed after a while was we don't have this banging on the boot with the wand anymore. It was actually quite interesting. It just happened to be a thing we observed. So we just used the word wand. Again, it's probably more because the population that we work with, we've got to be very careful, because at a subliminal level, if we talk about whips, it probably generates some, you know, fairly aggressive thoughts and behavior. That's okay, daily working hours. Yeah, daily working hours. We keep a record of every hour that the horse works. So each day and over the week, we can actually see what the horse is doing, and we can adjust it accordingly. Okay, so it's just 5 to 10. I noticed yesterday when we were watching the demonstration in here, there was a couple of movements that the horse was doing, which reminded me, do we have a microphone for this? Do we have a microphone for the last piece? It may or not may work for you, but let me just outline this to you. This is just a bit of fun. This is some of the stuff that we do. As, for example, when the Hetty conference comes to Dublin in 2018, we're going to put a play on with children and horses, similar to a play that we put on about maybe 4 years ago. It started off as an idea, and the play was Snow White and 7 Dwarfs. So we had 2 miniature ponies and 5 dogs, and they were dwarfs. And we had a pony who was Snow White, and we had a big horse that was the prince. And we trained a dog to come in, bring the apple over to Snow White, the little pony. She ate the apple. We clicker trained her to die, and she died for 100 years. Every now and again, she'd get up and go back. I'm still not allowed to know what that word was as a cue to die. That'll go to the grave with the handler. And then the big horse came in, kissed her, she got up, and everything went bananas. It was absolutely mad, but it was brilliant. So we do little things like that every now and again. So this has got nothing to do with equitation science, by the way, but I just thought it was a nice way to end this. The nose piece of the head collar, you'll note, is a little bit low on the ponies. But anyway, it's just a little bit of fun. There is music to go with it, but... That's okay. So we do a lot of long lining with the horses, particularly if we have riders who are too heavy, because we will weight limit as well for our horses. The music was I'm on my way, if you can just think it. That's when you've got 5 and you're doing movements with 2, somebody gets stuck in the middle. He puts in that little hop every now and again. Thank you very much.